Battlefield has become synonymous with destruction. Ever since the Bad Company era, the series has set the gold standard for destruction in FPS games. If we look back at Bad Company 2, every single building could be reduced to rubble. You couldn't hide anywhere on the map, and explosions felt impactful, both in terms of the damage they could do, but also things like the sound design and the effect on the actual gameplay itself. The emphasis on no cover being permanent in Bad Company 2, I think really set the tone for what Battlefield should be like going into the future, and what I believe we need to see more of in Battlefield 6. Destruction isn't just a cosmetic element that we expect to see, particularly with modern hardware. It should be something that changes the gameplay for us to experience in first person. As I mentioned, Bad Company 2's fully destructible environments could all be leveled, which meant that snipers couldn't hide in buildings. People had to maneuver around the map in a very, very different way to what we've seen perhaps in the later entries in the franchise. For me, that added some more tactical depth to the game, just because you never knew what was going to be around the corner, what you were going to come up against, or how you would have to manage the cover that just was left on the map. I think the majority of people who played the Bad Company games would also reference it as its most satisfying destruction system in the whole of the franchise. However, I could also see the point that if there is literally no cover, it becomes a flat mess and really there's nothing to play around, and I can appreciate that to an extent. Let's be honest, we've all been playing Battlefield 2042 for the past few years, particularly when the game's maps first released. They were pretty much empty wastelands as well, just without the destruction element. And I think we can all agree that really they weren't the most fun to play on. If we move a little bit further forward in time now, we can take a look at Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. I would put them together as kind of a block in terms of how they approach destruction. For me, Battlefield 3 certainly built on the foundations of Bad Company 2. Total destruction was removed, but the destruction that remained was definitely more polished and fitted more into the aesthetic that they were trying to build with the game. So things like walls and cover could be broken, but overall the buildings were a lot sturdier and definitely didn't crumble as easily as in Bad Company 2. I think if we're going for a sweet spot, between Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3 is probably where I would put the destruction. I do want more total destruction, but I also appreciate the polished approach that we saw with Battlefield 3. We can't forget about Battlefield 4 though, where they took destruction to a whole nother level with Levolution. We'll always reference Siege of Shanghai and the skyscraper collapsing, or maps like Lankang Dam bringing the dam down. Of course, how can we forget about Paracel Storm and the ship crashing into the shoreline as well? The difficulty is that even though I remember these being so cinematic and still enjoy seeing them to this day when I hop on Battlefield 4, these were all scripted. We as players didn't really have much of a say in what happened with them. We just activated them and watched the madness occur, which to be honest is always fantastic, and I must admit they absolutely nailed the cinematic elements for all of these. The trade-off to this though is that there was less organic sandbox destruction in Battlefield 4 compared to the likes of Bad Company 2. That's not to say there wasn't any destruction though, there were still elements of the maps which could be removed, and I still definitely appreciated that too. For me, I would probably put Battlefield 4's destruction just a little bit below Battlefield 3's, because they went for the larger cinematic spectacle, rather than focusing as much on the smaller sandbox destruction that we'd become used to in the previous two games. Next, I'll group Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 together. In these games, I think we pulled even more away from the pure destruction that we'd seen even in the last three titles and made it something a lot more polished and a lot more refined. Battlefield 1, for me, had elements of destruction, but it certainly seemed like a lot of the maps already had a lot of their areas leveled regardless, so it didn't really make a difference in terms of if walls were being blown out and things of that nature, or they were already in place and you couldn't remove them. The immersive details that they'd built were already imprinted onto the maps, and we couldn't really alter those as players too much. Buildings could be shelled apart on some maps, but it certainly took a lot more damage to take them down in comparison to the likes of Bad Company 2. With Battlefield 5 though, DICE certainly took a different approach, and one that I probably wasn't expecting as a player. They did keep some destruction in terms of actual emplacements and things that we could destroy as players, but they lent more into the soldier interaction with destruction. By that I specifically mean the fortification system. Players are able to place things like sandbags, fortifications and barbed wire, which can easily then be destroyed by the opposition. So even though it's not a direct part of the level, you still feel like you are having an impact both in terms of the destruction, but also the rebuilding of maps. Again though, buildings and elements that were already on the map still could collapse, but again, nowhere near to the same level as Bad Company 2 or Battlefield 3. I think for me there was more of a shift towards the realism of destruction, not quite the wow factor that we saw in Battlefield 4 or even Battlefield 3, and I believe that's probably to do with the art design and the approach that DICE wanted to take at that stage with Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, and to be honest, they are the more visceral games of the franchise in my opinion. And that is also regardless of the level of destruction for me. I think we do need to put a little footnote in this video about 2042 and really the lack of destruction in the game. I'm not going to disparage 2042 or say that that's a bad thing. At this point, I think we've all made up our minds how we view 2042, particularly in relation to the amount or lack thereof of destruction. But equally, I feel like the developers were put in a bit of a crunch to try and shoehorn that in, and it didn't really work out the way they wanted it to. We've already been able to sample a little bit of Battlefield 6's destruction. At least from what I've played, it kind of sits in the middle. It's a bit of a floating conduit between the likes of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 1 and 5. It didn't feel like there was as much destruction as a Bad Company 2, and I don't think we'll ever see that again, to be honest, no matter how much I pray for it. But there certainly was a lot more destruction than the likes of Battlefield 5 and also Battlefield 2042. I'll be interested to see if they focus more on large-scale cinematic destruction for some of the larger maps, the likes of Operation Firestorm, which we're obviously seeing come back from Battlefield 3 and 4. Again though, I'm sure the developers are trying to find that middle ground between having enough destruction to keep us happy and make us feel like we're immersed in the gameplay, whilst not then completely obliterating the entire maps. To be honest, I'm pretty tired of playing on empty wastelands after 2042, so I would much rather have at least some structures left knocking around, regardless of the state that they're in. With the competition in the destruction realm now probably being overtaken by the finals, in my opinion, DICE really need to nail the destruction for Battlefield 6, not only to set themselves apart from their competition, but also to really cement themselves as that cornerstone of the FPS genre, with destruction being at the heart of that. The only other thing I'll say is I want to see some only in Battlefield destruction moments again. I don't feel like I've had those for a little while now, and I think this could be the game to do it. Let me know down in the comments below if you want to see large-scale levolution in Battlefield 6, or if you prefer the more organic, player-driven elements like in Battlefield 3, Battlefield 5 and Bad Company 2. As always, thank you very much to my Patreon supporters. You can sign up down below for as little as $1 a month, and it supports the channel and helps me put out brand new and exclusive content for you too. If you want to see more Battlefield 6 and are looking forward to the release, hit like and subscribe. There's going to be plenty more coming down here soon too. As always, thanks very much for your time, and I'll catch you all in the next one.